Hello friends, let us continue our discussion on dislocation, particularly the ways to quantify the distortions that are brought about by the dislocation and the nature of the dislocation as a whole. So in the previous lecture, we saw or discussed extensively about the Burgers vector. So the Burgers vector, it helps us to quantify the distortion brought about by a dislocation, and also it helps us distinguish different forms of the dislocation. More particularly in the previous lecture, we saw that using appropriate convention, we can distinguish different types of dislocation within a given category. So using the Burgers vector and using a different combination of convention, we can distinguish the positive edge dislocation from the negative edge dislocation. And these conventions, we refer to it as the line sense. And this line sense cannot operate on its own. While constructing a Burgers circuit, we cannot directly introduce line sense. We have to presuppose it with the left hand or the right hand convention, which is also referred to as the start finish convention. So while constructing a Burgers vector, we have to begin with the start finish convention. The start finish convention tells us which system to consider first. In case of the right hand convention, we begin with the ideal system. In case of the left hand convention, we begin with the realistic system with the dislocation that we want to study. So once you establish that convention first, then you move on to the line sense, and depending on your consideration, you can consider the positive edge defect and combine it with a clockwise path for the Burgers circuit, or you can do it vice versa. So by these convention, in addition to understanding which type of dislocations we are considering and the magnitude of the dislocation, just by looking at the Burgers vector, we will be able to understand what is the nature of this particular type of dislocation that we are studying. Particularly when we are considering edge dislocation, using this convention, we will be able to distinguish the positive edge dislocation and the negative edge dislocation. In addition to these conventions, we saw the ways to represent the Burgers vector. So it includes a component, a magnitude component, and also a direction component. So both these components can be calculated by considering the atomic positions. Now, Burgers vector can also be or can be a lattice translation vectors when the magnitude of it represents the atomic position in a crystal lattice. So when the magnitude of the Burgers vector, the distortion created by the Burgers vector, or in case of the edge dislocation, the interatomic spacing between the newly introduced extra layer of atom is equal to that of the interatomic spacing in the given ideal lattice, then it is referred to as the lattice translation vector. And in case of the lattice translation vector, the magnitude of the Burgers vector will be equal to the interatomic spacing. And when you consider the interatomic spacing, we can consider the position of the atom and then express the Burgers vector accordingly. So the position of the atoms, we consider how the atom is positioned with respect to a reference point, and we consider its position based on all the three coordinate axes, and also how it has been positioned and how it has been moved away from this reference point, or what is the distance between it. So the distance between along with the position will give you the magnitude and the direction of the Burgers vector. We also saw how we can calculate based on the Burgers vector the magnitude alone. So we take the position of the atom or the interatomic position for each of the coordinate axes, we square it, and we take the square root of the overall term. Supposing if we consider like in the previous lecture, or since we have considered in the previous lecture the BCC, let us consider FCC here. So the Burgers vector for when the displacement between the atoms is similar to that of the corner atoms and the face centered atom, then the corresponding Burgers vector is represented in this manner, 1 by 2 of 1 1 0, because the position of the atoms when you compare the corner atom and the face centered atom, it is along this direction. We have both these atoms present, that is 110, and the position is a by 2 comma a by 2 comma 0. So when you want to consider the atomic position, the direction that we need to take into consideration for the FCC case is 110, and when you want to consider the atomic position specifically, then these are the atomic positions, and combination of the atomic positions and the direction will lead you to the representation of the Burgers vector. And if you want to consider the magnitude of this Burger vector alone, then it will be a by 2 the whole square, a by 2 the whole square, 0 plus. So this will be your magnitude of the Burgers vector when you consider a FCC crystal, and the Burgers vector is equal to the shortest interatomic distance, that is the interatomic distance between the corner atom and the face centered atom. So if I am right, it should be equal to a by root 2, rather root 2. So this would be the magnitude of the Burgers vector. Now when you have a dislocation where the Burgers vector is equal to the interatomic spacing in the regular lattice, or the Burgers vector is equal to the lattice translation vector, then the dislocation is referred to as the unit or the regular dislocation. So what we have is a category of dislocation can be referred to as the unit, or rather regular or perfect dislocation. So unit or perfect dislocation when you have the Burgers vector that is rendered by this dislocation equal to that of the interatomic spaces in interatomic spacing in a given lattice. So that means the Burger vector, the magnitude of the Burger vector when it is equal to the lattice translation vector. So B, the vector, is equal to the lattice translation vector. So lattice translation vector, it talks about different atomic positions in a given lattice, so on a particular direction in a particular axis. So when your Burger vector is equal to the lattice translation vector, then that corresponding dislocation is referred to as the unit or perfect dislocation. Sometimes it is also referred to as the regular dislocation. So you have your unit or perfect dislocation where your Burger vector is equal to or it is similar to that of the lattice translation vector. Now before proceeding further or before building on our understanding of the Burgers vector and the dislocation, let us consider how realistically a dislocation appears in a system. Few aspect of it, not the whole aspect of it, but few aspect of it. Now in a regular system, when you impose a system to a stress condition or a mechanical condition and the plastic deformation begins to occur in that system, then usually there are more than one dislocation that are being introduced into the system. So at a point it is possible that two or more dislocation interact. Supposing you have a point wherein two or more dislocations meet. Two or more dislocations meet, we refer to that point as a node. So a node of a dislocation is where a two or more dislocation meet. So each of these lines, it represents a dislocation line. So when you have a point, so each of these lines are a dislocation line, and when you have a point where two or more of these dislocation lines meet, we refer to it as a node, and this is usually observed in the physical condition where it is not just one dislocation that is operating, but there are more dislocation of variant forms that are operating, and when these dislocation they meet at a point, we refer to that as the node. Now in this node, a node where you have more than one dislocation that is operational, or you have the combination of more than two dislocation lines, in this node there is a perfect or there is a certain characteristic relation between the Burger vectors of each of these dislocation lines. Now, if you assume this dislocation line or the Burger vector associated with this dislocation line as B1 and this dislocation line as B2 and this dislocation line as B3, the Burger vector associated with these three dislocation lines as B1, B2 and B3 respectively. Now, there is a relation that exists between all these three Burger vectors when they interact at a node. So, there is a relation between these three Burger vectors because they interact at a point, they meet at a point, and this point is the node. Now, way you can understand the relation between these Burger vectors is by constructing a Burger's circuit. Now, when you construct a Burger's circuit here in this manner, let us use a different color. So, if you construct a Burger circuit around it, now this would give you the magnitude of the distortion that is brought about by the dislocation that is associated with B1. And now you can also construct a similar Burger circuit here that encompasses both B2 and B3. So, here your Burger circuit, it includes just the dislocation of B1 Burger's vector. Here you are constructing a Burger circuit that includes the dislocation line that is associated with B2 and B3. Now, it is important to note that here in these regions, the region away from the dislocation line, what you have is a undistorted or least distorted material. So, therefore, what we can say is that the distortion that is brought about by B1 is equal to, when you combine or when you construct a Burger circuit that is includes B2 and B3, and you are talking about the distortion as a whole that is included by B2 and B3. So, you are considering the system or a material or a region of the material that surrounds B1, and similar region you are considering B2 and B3. So, we are considering a region that is away from the dislocations, that here encompasses two of the dislocation associated with B2 and B3, and here it includes a dislocation that is associated with B1. So, since we are talking about a region that is away from the distortion of the dislocation, then it can be expressed as B2 plus B3. So, what we have essentially done is we have constructed a Burger's vector around B1 considerably away from B1, so that the distortion is not much, and what we are essentially talking about is more or less a regular arrangement of the atoms. And similarly, the amount we have considered, the amount we have displaced in order to construct this Burger's vector, we are doing the same for B2 dislocation separately and B3 dislocation separately. So, the amount you have moved away in order to construct the Burger circuit for B1, you have done the same for B2 and B3 and constructed a Burger circuit that includes B2 and B3 but sufficiently away from each of these dislocation. And then what we can say, since it includes this Burger circuit, just considers the bulk of the material wherein you have the regular arrangement of the atoms, then B1, the magnitude of the Burger's vector B1 or the distortion or the Burger vector that characterizes the dislocation like B1 is equal to the sum of the Burger's vector that characterizes the dislocation that meets at a point here. Now, depending on the convention that you take, so depending on the line sense that you consider, you can also write this as B2 is the summation of B1 plus B3 and vice versa. So, all these combination of how you express the interaction of the dislocation line at a given point or the interaction of a dislocation line in a node, the way you express it depends on the line sense. So, you can construct a Burger vector around B2 and B1, B2 alone, and then construct a Burger vector that includes B2 and B3 and express it in this manner. So, you can also consume a different form of the line sense and express the Burger vector B3 as the summation of B1 and B2. So, it all depends on how you construct your Burger circuit. And similarly, you can choose your line sense in such a way that your direction of the Burger circuit accordingly vary, and you can arrive at an expression something like this: B1 plus B2 plus B3 is equal to 0. So you can also set up the convention in such a way that the summation of the Burgers vector acting at this node is equal to 0. So here we have considered 3 different dislocation lines. We have considered 3 corresponding Burgers vector, and the summation of these Burgers vector is equal to 0 at the node. So this expression we have arrived at by appropriate line sense convention. Now if you have n number of dislocations lines interacting at a node, then this expression will be n summation of So this would be the way you would express the interaction of n number of dislocation lines at a node, and this way of representation is possible because of the line sense convention. So as we have, if you could recollect in the previous lecture, we saw that depending on the dislocation line and the arrangement of the atoms, we can assign a particular line sense, and this line sense we can accordingly vary in order to arrive at such an expression. And depending on the line sense convention, it is also possible for us to write the Burgers vector as the summation of 2 other Burgers vector. So the line sense convention and how we plot or how we construct the Burgers circuit helps us express this relation of the different Burgers vector associated with dislocation line interacting at a particular point or the node can be expressed. So this is referred to as the convention, or rather conservation, of Burgers vector at a node. So these representation, they all talk about conservation of Burgers vector at a node. So this is, it explicitly talks about, this particular expression here is explicitly talks about the conservation of the Burgers vector at a node, and these are different variants of it. So what we have essentially done is, we have considered different 3 Burgers dislocation lines interacting at a point. For in this case, we have considered 3 dislocation lines interacting at a point. Initially, we have constructed a Burgers circuit around one dislocation that is considerably away from the dislocation line, so that we are talking about more or less a perfect material or a regularly arranged material. And similar consideration we have rendered to the other 2 dislocation line. We have constructed a Burgers circuit quite away from each of these dislocation lines, that is B2 and B3, but we have combined these 2 and constructed one Burgers circuit. So that means we are largely talking about the perfect material wherein the distortion is pretty low. So that means we can equate B1 as the summation of B2 and B3. So this we have arrived at by appropriately constructing the Burgers circuit. Now we can make specific line sense convention, and we can express this relation as the summation of the Burgers vector is equal to 0. We can express it as the conservation of the Burgers vector. So this is made possible by the line sense convention, and these representation are quite possible by the appropriate construction of the Burgers circuit. So essentially we are talking in a region wherein the atomic arrangement is more or less regular, the distortion is quite low, and therefore we are able to arrive at this expression, and through appropriate line sense you can translate this expression into the conservation of the Burgers vector at a node. Now what we have now seen is, we have seen how to express a Burgers vector. We have been able to calculate its magnitude, and we have been able to represent its direction. Now we are talking about the interaction of different dislocations line at a point, and now we have arrived at an expression that shows that the Burgers vector of the different dislocation line that interact at a point, they should be conserved. Now this we are considering, or we are taking this interaction of the dislocations at a given point, because this is how physically we see the dislocation in a material. So the dislocation in a material, or the dislocation line in a material, it never ends within a crystal structure. If you consider a polycrystalline material and you consider a particular grain, a dislocation line will never end at a given or within a grain. So a dislocation line will only end at a grain boundary or at a surface. So the end point of a dislocation line is either a grain boundary or a surface. The other end point, if you consider a dislocation line, is the node, wherein we could translate this node as a splitting up of the dislocation line or a joining of two dislocations into a particular dislocation line. Either way, a node can also act as the end of a dislocation line, and wherein you have a splitting up or a joining of or a point of origin of a dislocation line. So a dislocation line in a physical case will never end within a crystal or will never end within a grain. It either ends at the grain boundary, it either ends at the surface, or either it terminates or splits into two at the node. So these are how we observe the dislocation line within or we observe the dislocation line in a realistic material. So this is how, and that is the reason why we need to consider how a dislocation interacts with each other, how or what happens when you have a point wherein two or three dislocations interact, the two or three dislocations interacting with each other. Now, another way a dislocation line can be found within a material or realistically within a system is when you have or is in the form of a loop. So you would have a dislocation in the form of a loop. So that means it is possible for a dislocation to be confined within a grain, and it is not being terminated at the grain boundary or at the surface, but the dislocation line it meets with the point of its origin, so it forms a loop. So these are the different ways that dislocation is found within a material, and because of these reasons we need to consider how a dislocation interacts with the surface, a dislocation how it interacts with each other, and we also need to consider how as a loop the dislocation moves, or as a loop how we can understand the dislocation, the nature of it. So in the subsequent lectures we will be considering, now so far we have considered how a dislocation or how we can understand the interaction of a dislocation in a node. In the subsequent lectures we will be talking about dislocation in the form of a loop, and also the interaction of a dislocation with the surface. Now the reason we need to talk about these, and also the interaction of the dislocation with the grain boundaries, the reason why we will be considering such interaction is because this is the nature, or this is how physically a dislocation is present in a system. Now, so we have seen few terminologies, we have seen the way we can express a dislocation, or the way we can express the magnitude and the direction associated with the Burgers vector of a dislocation. So the Burgers vector, it talks about how or what a distortion, what sort of a distortion a dislocation brings, and we have been able to express it. We have been able to talk about some conventions to bring a completion to how one can quantify the dislocation in a material. We will introduce another terminology. We will talk about another terminology. So we have been talking about a single dislocation, and now at a node we have talked about two or more dislocation and how they interact, and we have seen the dislocation, they do not end or terminate within a grain. We see that they interact with surface, grain boundary, and they appear in the form of a loop. Now to give a completion to this fundamental understanding of the dislocation line, how we talk about the ways to quantify it, to give a completion, let us consider one more terminology or one more way to quantify the dislocation. It is referred to as the dislocation density. So this dislocation density, it helps us understand the amount of dislocation that is present in a system. Supposing you are introducing a system, or you are exposing a system to a mechanical condition, and the plastic deformation is the material begins to deform plastically, or the plastic deformation is being induced into the system. So as the plastic deformation is being induced, the amount of dislocation, it keeps on increasing. So the increase in the amount of dislocation is being calculated by the dislocation density, and the dislocation density is the sum of the length of dislocation line per unit volume. So dislocation, if you could recollect, it's a line defect, and one component that you can measure in the line defect is its length, and when you consider the length of all the dislocations lines that are present in a system and divided it by volume, you end up with what we refer to as the dislocation density. So if LD is the summation of all the dislocation, all the lengths of the dislocation lines. So you consider the length of individual dislocation lines and sum it together, and then you consider the volume of the material, which should be L cube, then you would have your dislocation density. So since this is in meter and this is in meter cube, the unit of the dislocation density is per meter square. So this is how we calculate the dislocation density. So in the subsequent lectures, wherein we will be talking about the increased plastic deformation in the material, we will be considering dislocation density. So dislocation density is nothing but the summation of the lengths of the individual dislocation line in or per unit volume of the material. So the other way of calculating the dislocation density is by counting the number of dislocations in a surface. You consider a surface within the material and you count the number of dislocations. And since it is the number of dislocations per the surface of the material, you have the number which has no unit and it's per surface area, so which is of meter square. It has no unit. We have the same unit for the unit remains the same, the dimension remains the same. So this is another way of calculating the dislocation density, that is the calculating or by counting the number of dislocations in a surface, within a surface or along the surface of the material. Now depending on the definition of the dislocation density, so the definition of the dislocation density, we can choose between these two depending on the problem that you are addressing. Supposing you are considering a microstructure, a two-dimensional microstructure, and it is possible for you to only count the number of dislocation, then you would go with this description. Supposing you are doing some theoretical studies and you are able to calculate the length of the dislocations, then you would move with this description. So whenever you are talking about the dislocation density, it is important to define or express which definitions you are considering, because depending on the definition you are considering, the dislocation density might vary. Usually the dislocation density that is associated with the surface or the number of dislocation along a surface, it is usually less than that of the dislocation density that is defined or described by considering the sum of the dislocation lines. So therefore, whenever you are talking about the dislocation density, it is important to express or important to be very much clear about which definition you are pursuing or which definition you are adopting. And this definition must be consistent for throughout all your studies, because the value of the dislocation density considerably vary depending on which definition you follow. And in case of, it is important to note that the surface consideration when it renders a reduced amount of dislocation density when compared to the volume consideration. So how that we have been doing so far is consider the dislocation abstractly. Even though we have considered dislocation as a form of the defect, we did not quantitatively or to speak extensively, we did not relate this dislocation to any form of mechanical condition. We did not so far relate how a plastic deformation can be understood in the context of or with relation to the dislocation. We have studied dislocation separately, we have studied or we have quantified or we have seen what are the effects that a dislocation would bring to the system, and based on this effect how we can categorize the dislocation, how we can quantify these effects, particularly the distortion that it brings, and how we can perfect this Burgers vector that quantify the distortion a dislocation brings, and how it differentiate one dislocation from another dislocations. We have talked about extensively or quite extensively on the properties of the Burgers vector. We have talked about how the different conventions that needs to be introduced in order to construct a Burgers circuit and a Burgers vector properly. Also now we have seen how we can quantify the number of dislocations that are present in a system, and what are the nature or the different ways in a dislocation can be present in the system. So this we have considered individually. We have seen dislocation as a defect and we have treated it individually. Now let us consider, or let us go back to our primary aim of relating dislocation to that of the plastic deformation. So this is where we began. The reason we entered into the defects, the study of the defect, is because we want to understand how in the atomistic level the plastic deformation is experienced, and we have seen different forms of the defects and we have focused largely on the dislocation. Now, from this moment onwards and moving forward in few more lectures, we will be considering or relating the dislocation to the plastic deformation that we observe macroscopically on the material. So in order to do that, let us begin by reconstructing the setup. So we have here reconstructed, or we have constructed here a setup with the dislocation by considering the lattice or the atomic positions. We have considered a simple cubic system, a simple cubic crystal system. We have considered the atomic position or the lattice points. We have joined these lattice points and we have focused on a particular direction. And this way we have been talking about the edge dislocation and also the other forms of the dislocation. Now let us move away from it. Let us talk in terms of the macroscopic scale. Let us talk in terms of the change in the system that we observe with our naked eye. Now supposing you have a system something like this, a cuboidal system, and you are imposing a shear stress along this direction. So imposing a stress along this direction. The reason I call it this as shear stress is because if you could recollect, it is the shear component of the stress that brings about the plastic deformation in the material, the deviatoric stress that brings about the plastic deformation in the material. And so you are imposing a stress in this direction, and what you observe is there is a shift in the position or the of the corners. And what if you could recollect this shift in the position, or if you could connect this shift in the position to the nature of the edge dislocation that we see. So what we see here is the position which was initially here, the position of the corners which was initially here has been shifted. Now what we are trying to do is talk in terms of the atomistic level and talk in terms of the way the atoms are arranged when you consider the shift in this corners. So what essentially happens is the atoms, the row of atoms that occupied or that rendered the corner is now somewhere within this region. So what they have done is, so they have moved into the regular arrangement of the atoms. So the atoms that initially were responsible for the formation or the position of the corners now are acting as the extra layer of the atoms. So initially when these atoms move away from the corners, when the corners of this regular cuboid is being shifted, what happens is that there is an extra layer of atom that is being introduced. So you are moving the corners, and we are moving the corners by introducing or the extra layer of atom. The atoms that is supposed to constitute these corners, since the corners have shifted, we are not removing the atoms, but we are moving those atoms to the internal region, meaning you are creating an extra layer of atoms. Now, so in this region what you have is the corners, the extra layer of atoms has moved and it has occupied a position here. So the extra layer of atom can be found here. So this is where you have your extra layer of atoms. So you have moved your atoms by imposing a shear stress, and the extra layer of atoms are found here. Now the extra layer of atoms are found above this line here. So above this line Fe, you have the extra layer of atoms. So that means the Fe is the dislocation line. So Fe is the dislocation line. So by imposing a stress, you have created an extra layer of atoms and you have moved the corners of the solid material, and the extra layer of atom is now at the G or EFGH region, and the extra layer of atoms is found above the line EF, and that is the dislocation line. Now since we are talking in terms of the extra layer of atoms, we are considering a dislocation line above which the extra layer of atoms is present. Essentially what we are talking about is the edge dislocation in a three-dimensional or a macroscopic scale. We are talking about a pure edge dislocation in the macroscopic scale. So this region here has already experienced the movement of the extra layer of atoms. The extra layer of atoms which began here, now it has moved and has reached a point here. So initially the extra layer of atoms would have been here. You keep on imposing the stress and it has moved till this region. So the overall structure, so the overall material above this plane here, so above this plane AB, the overall material above this plane ABCD has experienced an extra layer of atoms, and this extra layer of atoms has moved. So there is a region which has already experienced the movement of the extra layer of atoms, and a region which is yet to experience the movement of the extra layer of atoms. So to speak, this extra layer of atoms and the row of the extra layer of atoms with which we discuss these atoms, that is the dislocation line, is what we refer to as the edge dislocation. So there is a region in this system which has already seen the movement of the edge dislocation, and there is a certain section of this region which is yet to see the movement of the edge dislocation. This movement of the edge dislocation, or just the dislocation, is what we refer to as the slip. So the definition of the slip is the movement of the edge dislocation. We will be specific about what sort of movements we are talking about in few moments or in the next lecture, but if you consider this particular system here, what you have done is you have caused a shift in the corners by imposing a particular amount of shear stress, and this shift in the corners is introduced by, or this is caused by introducing the extra layer of atoms. This extra layer of atoms, it is not static, it is keep on moving, and this movement of the atoms has caused a slip in this region. So the movement of the atom is experienced by a particular section of the material, and this is what we refer to as the slip. So a particular section of the material has slipped with respect to the other region of the material. So in this case, we have a slipped region and we have an unslipped region. So when the dislocation moves, we have a formation of the slipped region, and in the region wherein the dislocation has not moved, we refer to as the unslipped region. So therefore, one definition of the dislocation, or one way to distinguish the dislocation or identify the dislocation, it is the region, or it's the plane or the line that separates slipped and the unslipped region. So in this case, what you have is a three-dimensional microstructure where you have a region in which the dislocation has moved and the region wherein the dislocation is yet to move. The region the dislocation has moved, we refer to as the slipped region, because the movement of dislocation we refer to as the slip, and the region we refer to as the slipped region, and the other region we refer to as the unslipped region. So it is the dislocation line, or the position of the dislocation, that separates the slipped region from the unslipped region. So therefore, the dislocation line can be identified, or the overall plane of the dislocation line can be identified as the region that separates the slipped region from the unslipped region. Now this can be easily understood when you consider how the atoms, or the position of the atoms, change when you impose the stress. Now so all we have done is we have considered the two-dimensional representation of this plane here, and we are talking in terms of the positions of the atoms. Now as you can see, you have shifted the corner, or you have shifted this layer of atoms here by imposing the shear stress, and now because of that you have the extra layer of atom in between the two regular lattice layers of the atoms. Now this layer of atoms, it keeps on moving as the stress is imposed on the material. So this extra layer of atoms, it keeps on moving and it keeps on shifting its position, and ultimately it reaches the surface and it forms its own corners, or it forms what we refer to as the surface step. So what we have is, we have the movement of the corners because of the imposed stress by the formation of the extra layer of atoms, and when you continue to impose the stress, this extra layer of atoms, which we refer to as the edge dislocation, it keeps on moving. So this edge dislocation, and the line, or the dislocation line, is here, it is pointing towards us, and along with the extra layer of the atoms, this dislocation line keeps on moving, and when it reaches the surface, it pops out and forms a surface step. So this is how a dislocation, particularly the edge dislocation, interacts with the surface, and by this interaction leads to the formation of the surface step. So what we have essentially observed is, we are not during a plastic deformation or while bringing a plastic deformation, we are not, as we have treated in the previous case or in the purely theoretical case, we are not considering a jump of the atom from one atomic position to another atomic position. We are not ideally pursuing this. This is not how the plastic deformation occurs. But the plastic deformation, when you consider the edge dislocation, it occurs by the formation of the extra layer of atoms. So the simplistic consideration of the slip as the movement of atoms, or the plastic deformation as the movement of atom from one stable position or the equilibrium position to another equilibrium position, it is not how it occurs, but rather the plastic deformation occurs in this case of the edge dislocation by the introduction of the new layer of atoms. And that is the reason why we saw a significant disparity in the stress required for the introduction of plastic deformation in the real-time case or in the physical case when compared to the stress required theoretically. So the stress required to bring about the plastic deformation was calculated under this assumption, assuming that the plastic deformation is the movement of atom from one stable position to another stable position. However, as you can see here, the plastic deformation occurs in different manner, which we will see subsequently or in few moments. But in case of edge dislocation, the plastic deformation occurs by the movement of the extra layer of atom, by the introduction and the movement of the extra layer of atoms. It is not that the atoms move from one stable position to another stable position directly, but it is through an extra layer of atoms. And that is the reason why the physically observed stress to introduce plastic deformation, physically observed stress, which is much lesser than or significantly lesser than the theoretical stress that you calculate when you assume that the atoms move from one equilibrium position to another stable position directly during plastic deformation. So this stress is referred to as, so this stress that is associated with the migration of the extra layer of atoms and the plastic deformation that is brought about by this migration of the extra layer of atoms or the migration of the dislocation is referred to as the Peierls-Nabarro stress. Peierls-Nabarro stress. So according to the way this stress is calculated is based on the dislocation. So this stress is not calculated based on the rather fundamental theoretical understanding of the movement of atom from one stable position to another stable position. This is not how the stress is calculated. So this stress is calculated based on the migration or the movement of the dislocation. So the plastic deformation is treated as in terms of the movement of the dislocation, and when you consider the plastic deformation as the movement of the dislocation, then the stress that is required to introduce the plastic deformation is referred to as the Peierls-Nabarro stress. Now, this is the reason why the dislocation was introduced in the first place. If you could recollect, the reason for considering the dislocation is because of the disparity between the physically observed stress to bring about the plastic deformation when compared to the theoretically required stress to bring about the plastic deformation. So far what we have considered is, we have considered how an edge dislocation is able to bring about a plastic deformation. So the edge dislocation, by introducing the extra layer of atoms between the regular arrangement of the atoms, is able to bring the plastic deformation, and this plastic deformation is achieved by the movement of this extra layer of atoms. Now the reason why this particular stress or the physically observed stress is less than the theoretical stress when you have a plastic deformation that is introduced by the dislocation, particularly edge dislocation, because if you consider the extra layer of atoms, it is already in its unstable position. So therefore you need a less amount of stress to move it to a neighboring or a nearby stable position. So what you essentially have is an extra layer of atoms in its unstable position, and you are trying to move to its stable position. So X is the unstable position and you are trying to move to its stable position. So therefore you need a little amount of stress. However, once it moves to Y, you have a creation of a new extra layer of atoms or a new layer of atoms, and you have to have a same amount of stress to move it to the neighboring stable position. So that is the reason that since we already have an extra layer of atoms that is already occupying an unstable position, and the stress is now required only to replace this atom from this unstable position to its stable position, we have a theoretical or a physical stress that is required for the plastic deformation much less than that of the theoretical stress. So it is not an atom moving directly from one stable position to another unstable position. It is not that. It occurs in case of edge dislocation at least in two ways. It occurs by the creation of the extra layer of atoms in the unstable position, and from that the extra layer of atoms from this unstable position moves to the stable position. So because of this separation of one single event from the movement of atoms from stable position to another stable position to the formation of extra layer of atoms at the unstable position and the movement of this extra layer of atoms from the unstable position to the stable position. Because of this mechanism of plastic deformation, you have a considerable decrease, or you have a significantly low stress that is required to bring about the plastic deformation in the physical case when compared to the theoretical consideration. So we will continue our discussion on understanding the edge dislocation and how it relates to the slip in the subsequent lecture. So so far what we have seen is the dislocation that we have abstractly considered so far, that we have studied so far in individually plays a critical role in the slip. So what we have seen is we have now exclusively focused on the edge dislocation, that is the edge dislocation by introducing an extra layer of atoms, and by migrating this extra layer of atom brings about a plastic deformation in the material, and this deformation that is brought about by the migration of the extra layer of atoms, or the dislocation, or the edge dislocation to be specific, is what we refer to as the slip. Now more about the migration of the atoms and more about how the screw dislocation brings about the slip we will be considering in the next lecture. So we will see ourselves in the next lecture. Goodbye.